let's just see how this one goes. So yeah, alright, it looks like clowns, but fuck it says clones. And then we've got evolving and adapting. So we should put either. So evolution is natural based. Here in one vessel, it is very slow progress. So evolution is slow. But what if you want to speed it up? Make it quicker. Make it so that you are not just adapting here, but you are multi-adaptable at any given scenario. So we're going to put this in a little way. So we'll get to that. So slow, and we want to speed it up. So, without using anything that is not natural, but in a natural sort of way, would be the best way to work with it. Not chemical based, not by any other way. So how would you do it? Well, you create multiple clones. And then there's also learning about birth. And then there is learning about death. So when we're born, our minds are not adapted enough to understand what birth's all about. So another way to learn about this would be to have an adapted mind, that if you push out a clone, so let's say if the mind for humans is evolved at 40, and it still grows, it just means that it's going to peak upwards, the mind. The mind is like an intelligence database. A lot of stuff comes in, we learn a lot about ourselves. Now, I learned a lot about myself, but let's say from the ages of 10 below, maybe we could say 5. I think for me it was around 4 years old I become aware of existence. Maybe it was a little bit more before that, but when I became a bit more fully aware, and then again when I was 20. So I could say 5 I remember, 4 I remember, 3 intermittently, so I'm just going to put inter on that one. 5 was, well, kind of more adapted to be a bit more focused aware. And then let's say from 10 to 13 you are, the mind is really taking in info. And then by your 21 to 22 you're on fire. But for most of these, anything below 21, it's a bit more information based around 10 years old. From 4 years old, that's more like reception and being in school at reception age. And then from 3 years old, it's sort of on and off, like a lighthouse, sort of binging every now and then. But with this lighthouse, it gets faster and faster and faster and faster until you can no longer see it flickering. It's more of a constant beam of awareness. So the awareness sort of, it's almost flatlining with a few spikes in there. And then it gets more quicker, more quicker, more quicker, more quicker, more quicker, more quicker, until a point where it is creating quite a tube of awareness, let's say. So, and these you can put into a graph, give or take. I mean, it's not very clear, I can't shadow that very well. Anyway, so it sort of flatlines out. And that's in the beginning, so being born. And then it sort of strobes, flickers, 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 and this is your awareness of the world, yourself. And then it gets a bit more stronger, the flashing gets a bit more quicker, and then all of a sudden it's so fast that it almost feels like life is, and that could be your awareness in the eyes with the flick book. Comes in very slowly, you get intermittent bursts every now and again. So a kid sort of now you can look at this by looking at other children, but you still don't know. You understand what it's like. So every now and then they're asleep, and then they wake up and they're a little bit alert for a bit, and then they shut down again. And then they wake up and then this happens when we're growing as well. So the lighthouse gets more and more faster. And then all of a sudden you're connected to reality. And it's a lot more stronger. And then you begin to get to 25 and then you're really on fire. On fire means that it's almost inconceivable. It feels like the realest thing. Now, the strangest thing is that the quantum part of you, your quantum mind, this is really bizarre, is really strong when you're a kid, and then this one begins to blip out, and when your awareness comes, it's sort of in bursts. That's your quantum. So we could say the inner mind, being the quantum awareness, sort of is really strong in the beginning and it phases down, and your physical awareness becomes more stronger and it excels, a bit like when you sit there and you daydream. And just as you go to daydream, reality folds out and quantum comes in. This is a blip. This creates a blip on your quantum mind, and that's how it's intermittent with the quantum. And reality seems to switch, and you sort of, it's basically like landing one plane whilst another plane is just then taking off, as this one is leaving the tarmac to rise. This one is just touching, and they both touch at a sort of same sort of moment, and one sort of peaks down whilst the other one takes off. And death, you might want to say that it's the reverse of that, and then you wane out and the other one becomes more a bit like the flashing, the bursts just before you die. It's quite hard to ask people right on the end of their last moments. I think that they're barely aware of it, because they then have the reverse of this, where they become less aware of reality and more aware of quantum, and then right on actual death, the quantum mind explodes, and then you are transitioned the same way you daydream and transition. You can think of it that way. It's another thing if you believe it, that's up to you. If you believe that everybody is going to be cast off into something else, that's up to you to believe that. Now, in with this, if I look back on my days of being younger, and like probably anybody else, you are not really fully aware of what was going on then. You were too young to be it. Now, if you can make a clone, and you can clone yourself, there's a lot of beautiful things that come from cloning. So we've also got birth and death. We've got evolution. So these are a lot of things. And then we've got information. Now, birth and death is like times 2. Information is also times 2. Because your information of what your body is going to be taking as information. So we can think of that as evolution. Evolution is going to be recording information and trying to evolve you while taking in this data of your outside world. And your inner world, being your mind, is going to gather a lot of thoughts, and this will then play into your potential, what you could potentially do with that information. The more information you have, the more things you can do with that information. So you can build off of information. But also, evolution can also build you from that information. So the more information, and evolution is very, very slow. We think about it as life, my life, your life. That's learning a piece of the information, and then that drops down. And then if you have children, they're learning a bit more of that information that you've passed on, and then that subsides down, and then their children learn some more information, and depending on how long this time goes on for, bloodlines, doesn't really matter, you are giving more information for evolution, and you are taking in more information in your reality and your understanding. And then what is taught there's two types of teaching. Exterior, someone else teaching you, and your inner mind teaching. And then there's a third type, which is your evolutional teaching. So a lot of this information is what allows you to be more capable as a life form. Life forms being life in itself. Humans are an exception to the rule. More so some than others, but still, exceptions to the rule compared to animals. That is definitely a quantum leap when we think about animals. Animals are not going to be able to do anything about their fate. Not right now. Humans can do something about their fate, but they also have the ability, and it's expected ability. It's kind of the iron fist, but it's also democracy. So it's democracy in a way that you can choose to breathe, or you can hold your breath and perhaps pass out. You can have democracy to go underwater. You can choose to breathe that water in, or the mind will say that's not a good idea, perhaps not. Where does it get that understanding from? Loads of past events where there has perhaps been drowning involved in your... Somewhere along the line, you got to ask yourself the question, how many different ways have your bloodline died? And therefore this is filling up information. Okay, it's not put forward in your mind for you to think about it every day, but it's important for evolution to understand that, to then give you building blocks with the information, which combines evolution information, it's knowing, and then you've got information that you know, and then it sends a thought. It's probably not a good idea you breathing in water, or at least trying to inhale water. This causes death, and then the two can sort of work together to give you an informed decision. That's not a good idea. Touching fire, you get burnt. I think a lot of this comes from, again, a trifactor. It comes from evolution. How many of your ancestors have ever died in fire? And then you've got another one of your informed decisions of inwardly to help cast this, and then you've got outwardly of other people telling you that that's hot. Then you've got a fourth type, which is if you touch it yourself and you burn yourself on the small scale, you ain't gonna be sticking your hand in no big fire or running into a fire, because of the small scale, the information, what people have told you, wisdom, and then evolution. All of these combine to create a picture that then says fire, hot. And then this teaches you about space, makes you space ready. Would you touch the star? Well, you wouldn't go near the star. Why not? Well, that's pretty hot. And then if we look at a black hole, well, that's very cold. You might start getting rather cold more you get closer to it, and ooh, I don't know if I really want to be that close, or perhaps I need to cover up. Informed decisions, feeling, focusing in, and another one is feeling. Feeling is information, which then feeds brain information, which then gives you thoughts, which then makes wise decisions based on that. Now, all of these things can be learned at a snail's progress, and then it takes a very long time over your family history to learn this, and it's very slow. Well, if you're making machines, and machines can clone you, you can learn this information at a phenomenal ratio. This pumps into the database called your mind. Now, if you keep one of yourself safe, it's interesting, right? So let's say if we take the idea of a plant being able to clone. If we keep one of the plants safe, and we keep another one safe of the clones, and we keep these together in an environment that is perfect, that is wrapped in cotton wool. Now, if there's awareness on this, for humans it's a little bit different. They wouldn't like to be put inside an area like this where they're wrapped in cotton wool. They probably go stir crazy. But we do know that humans can go in suspended animation. Again, if you've got machinery, this is easy to teach this to the machines to then do this to humans, and these tactics would be used in a right way to be able to lull you down, to get your metabolic ratio slowed right down. And then you've got you don't keep them together, you keep them separate just in case one fails. Maybe you'd keep 3, maybe you'd keep 4, doesn't matter. The point is what I'm making. Then if you had the rest of the clones, that the plant had created. These ones, being plants, are quite happy in a good environment, and these ones then go off in experience, getting closer and closer, slowly but surely, because you would understand that slowly creates results. Eroding slowly. I mean, most groups know this, but if you use it right, and you use it correctly, and not to harm, not to control, not to do anything else, and you use it correctly, this is very beneficial. Hence why you have this gift. Shouldn't really be abused, but I guess sometimes things start that way, and then evolution just takes route, and things will sort themselves out, whether external force, whether a divine information, that's guidance too. We can put that up there. I will keep divine out of this one for a moment, but again, what you can do is being done, and you are also being guided here in each and every single way, but I'll do that in another video. We'll get on to that. For now, I want to try and keep this as simple as possible without going off on too many tandems. Right, so these ones are kept in finite condition. There are multiple fail-safes around these. Lots and lots of onion layers around here to keep this as safe as possible. These are your backups. These are your living backups, that if all fucks up on these ones, you got the rest to get some more clones from, and the process can keep going without ever meeting a true death. True death is to lose all of this. To lose all of it is a true death. And then that's it. Now, having awareness as being different to a plant, to humans, you get to learn something. So each time something is born, and it starts off small and young, you are learning about birth from a different advantage point. So when going through it yourself in the moment, and there's just one of you, it's hard to know what happened in the beginning days of your life, in those chapters, those first frames where certain things were happening. Let me see if I can shield that a little bit. In the first moments where you weren't exactly aware, but other people look at you and say, well, yeah, you were like a baby. Was I? You were crawling around. Really? Okay, that's one way to see it. Now, what happens if you have this awareness that everything you know now, in this format, so if you're 40 years old, everything that you understand now helps you to create informed decisions. That means that your mind is far more advanced now than it was when you were a youngster. And now we've cloned, and we've cloned to version number 1. We'll get on to the rest. So this is number 1. We're focusing on the first clone. As you're born and develop, what if you could have a direct link? So rather than having an exterior mind or an internal mind, you've now got one that's exterior while being internal. And as you're growing and developing, this is sending real-time information to a mind that's at 40 years old and more aware. It's not the third person perspective, but it might as well be the fourth perspective from number 1, seeing to number 2. And because you are watching and feeling and experience from in you, so we look at atom splicing. So if you splice an atom, rotate one, it rotates, rotate the other, and it counterclockwise. Whoosh, they maneuver at the same time. Now that is fascinating, but think of your mind being the same way. That anything that is spliced off of you, you are feeling, experiencing, and are taking a channel from that, and it is telling you real-time data with an advanced mind. So as you were first being born as a youngster, you don't have this heightened awareness. There's not enough processor power to understand that. If you ever needed to understand it, well, to understand fills in puzzle pieces. But now you've got this external mind that is connected to this alternate version of you, which technically is a clone. And as it develops, it is sending real-time information to a supercomputer, being your mind at 40 years. You then get to understand in bursts. It will take a few clones before you really are. You would have to practice with it. You wouldn't be able to get this on the first go. You wouldn't be able to understand everything about what happens to you mentally, cognitively, while you're in this torpor state and growing up. You would be able to see yourself externally and the way that you would grow. Now we've got to think of it as like a clone, but it's a very strange way of imagining it. You'll start off as young and begin to grow. Now, the difference was that you can't teach yourself the things that you know you like. So you can enhance what you were. Unfortunately, as humans pass down information, you are not in control of what you are learning. Let's say you get to cradle yourself. Take care of yourself as a child, as a clone. And given the information that you know, you can begin to condense the data through a different version of you, although it is you, but it's a different version, and it doesn't matter whether you die from here or here. The information always goes back to the mothership, being your main headquarters of your mind. The data will be sent. Ooh, now that is interesting. Now, providing this is the older one, and it pumps out another clone, it will have the same amount of awareness. You pump out another one, it has the same amount of awareness. And you begin to bring yourself up with all of the things that you know you're going to go on to like, because you've experienced it now. You know the stuff that you like, and you know the stuff that you don't like. So you can say, I didn't like doing this, and I didn't like doing that. And you get to learn a lot about yourself in this, and you can teach yourself stuff that real-time updates. Now, to knock that information out is an interesting thing. Because you could say, well, I still hold on to this information. Yes, you will hold on to the very first days that your caretakers look after you. But what will happen as you begin to teach your new clone, because this is more fresher in the mind, because it's coming in real-time information, you are then beginning to update yourself in real time. And the more you do this, the more enhanced that becomes. So you don't remember much about your childhood, but you would remember one if you started to understand if you could program yourself. Because it's relatively newer, and if you do this a lot of times, you condense the information. More condensed information means that you are able to let go of what once was taught to you, and this one becomes more enhanced. And as it becomes more enhanced, it becomes more condensed, and then it becomes more of what you are. And therefore, you're able to enhance this information. Now, that's one interesting thing to think about. Now, when we look at death, if this clone reached a certain level, and mind you, it's going to be younger than the ones that are sitting in here. Now, it depends which ones you want to get rid of. Do you want to keep this one in torpor and remove one and replace it with a more enhanced one? These are all updating it the same way, but this one's going to be old. This one's going to be relatively young, but old. It's going to be an old soul, but relatively new. So an old soul in a new clone, and then another old soul in a new clone, and another old soul in a new clone. You might keep the very first one and see how far that goes, because that helps you understand something, because it helps you understand true death. True death is the first clone that exhausts the end of its life expectancy. Now, providing you've got another two more newer clones that are younger, when these ones fizzle out, when you've given the best of what you can give them in this environment, you need to create a new environment. And then you take another 2 or 4 clones in this one, and they're younger, and then you'll be able to understand a trajectory. That if I give them this type of environment that I know to be the best of what I can give it, and by then time would have gone by, so the structures that hold this together will update. Now, will these ones live slightly longer? Yes. Could these ones die in a different way? Well, it's possible, but it seems more unlikely unless if you put them in the same biome, you're probably going to experience the same end of life as what these ones experienced. But then when you update this is probably going to change the dynamics, the outcome. So if you change the gases and find that there's a better gas that the body is capable of taking, and you update this gas and remove the things out that you thought were good and the body needed, but in actual fact it ended up hampering life, and then there's been enough time and enough knowledge and enough stuff and technology has evolved, plus the understanding has evolved, you're going to make a different structure. Now, you don't want to be getting rid of the old structure, far from it. You want to replace these with some new clones, and you put the new clones in here that are next age, and you're going to watch it. Does this one die before these new ones do? If it does, these ones die before this one, then this system is working better than this system. Then it's okay to delete this one, take it apart, you don't need it no more, and you'll rely on this new structure. Once you've seen it happen a couple of times, and the process leads on to longevity, then it's well okay to get rid of this system. You'll start to rely on this one now. And then that time would have gone by again, and then you would have updated some more technology around it, and once again, these clones, what once lived in here for 50 years, let's say, for argument's sake, this one is making it to 100, and then the next technology is making it to 200 years in this suspended animation. Each time any clone goes off and learns something, information. Now, what type of information is that? So let's say we take another one of our vessels and we put it near a neutrino. It's still a version of you. It is sending real-time information to your evolution, because the dynamics have changed. Do you live longer around a neutrino, or do you live a lot less around the neutrino? If you live less around the neutrino, and depending on how you die and what the outcome was, that is just fed evolution. But your evolution, not your bloodline evolution. You can still have a bloodline, and the more longer that you live, the more you enhance what you create. That's interesting, isn't it? So a kid that you had at this clone 50 years ago, but from here it's like 350 years ago. The next kids that you have are going to be more developed because there's more information from evolution. But it doesn't mean that your first child that you had when living in 50 years is any more less or more valuable, because they can catch up too with this technology. They can begin to condense it, and the other ones can begin to condense it. Now, where we find that is a very interesting thing is evolution goes one way. We notice that we're passing information downwards from basically from grandparents to mom to then children and then grandchildren, so on and so on. Just because we come into it and see evolution going this way, it does not mean that it doesn't go this way along the chain. Far from it. It means that we just don't know enough to know whether we can make it go the other way. There's the difference. So if you are enhancing your children, and you have a child at 350 years old with all of that compact information in there, and plus they do the same thing that your first children are now doing, they will all catch up eventually. And if you have enough time and enough cleverness and enough time to work it out, can you switch this backwards so you can make a hybrid clone? Can you take the information from one clone child, one clone adult? It's along the same structure, or you're sort of similar to how I am. Wow, you look for kind of the... Can we combine this? Rather than separating a twin and the egg splits, rather than it filling out those blanks on its own, can we fill it out with technology, with a future generation combined with a past generation? Can we seal these together? That's a very interesting fact. That gets a little bit more complicated. I will cover another video on that at another time, and it will fit into this as well with the divine, and we'll look at evolution a bit more deeply on another video. But we've got to unpack a lot of stuff before we get there, so I don't want to dive into that because it will lead on to a longer video than it needs to be. So anyway, there's evolution, Do you ever need to make evolution go backwards or forwards is another question, if you can contain the information from each time an alternate version of you dies. So far, each time an alternate version of you dies through your bloodline learn, and if evolution, the bloodline continues, it will give evolution enough time to work out, let's say naturally, cancer. But we're impatient, so we want to try and get on the curve of that. So humans want to try and work that out first. So what else do people die from? Multiple different things, and you want to try and work it out really quickly by using medical interventions and stuff like that. But you can do it a much faster way, given enough time. If you're around a neutrino star, something might activate that makes you a bit more immune to radiation. The more time you spend around the neutrino star, getting closer and closer, slowly but surely, with all the right suits and everything else, but exposing gently, very small amounts, but over the time you've got enough clones to do it. You will be able to learn a lot of information about evolution. The problem is that we've only got limited to one life. This one gives you as many as you want, as long as you keep these safe. Safety is an illusion, absolutely. It doesn't mean that you can't work it so that safety becomes an illusion. Yes, so if it is an illusion, you create backups. Multiple backups then means that you've got a lot of versions to clone from. If anything goes wrong with one of them, you can quickly get ahead with the others. And plus, if you keep the old alternate versions, you've always got a default to go back to. The information isn't lost, because after all, it's you. I am you, you are me. We are both of the same thing. Death is a weird thing. You see, that's going to be the first thing that anyone is going to be trying to be too scared to take the plunge, and then when you do it, that wasn't so bad, but I gotta remember that. That's the question. The biggest question to a human is, can you deal with that? Can you deal with that? And I think the first time you do it, it's hard. Second time you do it, it's a little bit more so. Third time, fourth time, fifth time, 1,000th time you've done it, it becomes second nature. Not only is evolution learning about your death in real time, but you are too. And then, plus with that information, could you imagine that? Dying, obtaining the information, it's basically real time transferring into you as you are now. And then you think, what could doctors do if they actually went through the disease but then were able to be guaranteed to be cured from it? It's hard to explain that. So sometimes they might need to experience the symptoms to make a great tablet on a particular clone if something is going bad. That's if you need to when you reach this stage. But could you just think about it in some type of way? Or to lose an arm, lose a limb or whatever else. If you were to lose it yourself, don't you get a lot more information about how that feels? Then if you were trying to stitch it together and it all goes wrong, off it goes. You might as well start again. Could you believe that life could be dispendable, but at your own fucking leisure at that, and you don't die? You've just lost a dead weight of what you are. It's basically like cutting off what didn't work, and you lose that alternate version of yourself, but you retain the information. That didn't work so well. Now, learning from evolutional point, from when you get near a certain planet, if you'll become so much more risky. Daring is not the word for it. And some fun sports might come from this. Also, the Destiny game is very similar to this. Like, you would create a clone to go and do some fake battles with one another, no longer using a computer. You are the computer. You go and do some weird shit with that and just boink out another clone, and that would be death. Over. I mean, if you've got enough resources to do it, and again, this is what it points down to, is having enough resources to create the clones. And if you keep on having children, the resources get smaller and smaller, then you need to traverse to get more resources in order to keep this expansion going. Oof. There is a limit to this. There is a downside to all of this. So whereas it seems like swings and roundabouts and it's the, oh wow, this is really great, there is also quite a downside to this. There is going to be a limit on how much you can do this. Again, if you're surviving this long, And providing you don't get wiped out by the final black hole, and you survive through all of that, you got your clones and you've got an awful lot of solar system to keep going. But again, if every life form was doing this, this makes sense as to why animals aren't unlocked. This is an interesting thing. You've got a certain amount of limit to stuff. This is very interesting. I mean, you don't last very long on starvation. You need nutrients, right? So it's not saying that you could never achieve being able to never eat again and still be able to function. No, that can be worked out. But still, if you're going to need a lot of nutrients, could you imagine if animals was awoken in the same way? They would want to do this too, and then you have even less to do this with yourself. That's a very interesting thing. This runs away, and it does become quite problematic. This can become really problematic. And talk about numbers. This is why robotics and vessels work. Small numbers versus larger amounts of robots. I don't know. No humans and just robots. Yeah. Again, robots can't plan this shit. Robots need humans to feed more data into them in order to be able to predict them, and somewhere along the lines you then start saying, do we need robots anymore? If you can clone yourself, would you need a robot? No, you don't. Do you get that? That's the kind of like cradle, if you like, that it becomes such a desperate thing to make robots, and then life forms seem to take care of themselves in this way. Using robots, don't get me wrong, I mean, you could probably send them out to go and mine some shit to get some more stuff, but what would you do with all of that time? And you get bored? You get bored now? The people who are like on isolation get so bored? Holy shit, then this ain't for you. If you can't live with yourself, and you can't live in isolation or solitude, this ain't for you. You'd never be able to cope with it. You know, as me mindset, victim mindset, gee me, you'll learn a lot more than just those. It just keeps going, and you can enhance this data. You become an old soul, but at what cost? When do you draw the line on, do we make any more generation? Again, that would be seen as darkness, right? What if the whole of the species are like, look, we've only got enough resources to clone this many, we're comfortable with this many, none of us are going to be having children anymore. But to come at that of a nation, a whole fucking nation, it would be you'll take nations as individual islands. No. Nations is in a nation of species, the whole thing. They're no longer expanding in this way, they're expanding in cloning and condensing and enhancing the information. Then there's what you learn. What do you learn? Well, you go to a planet, one alternate version of you. Rather than having teachers teach you in a classroom from a perspective, it's just not it. But getting hands-on learning, so that you have one clone that goes to the moon, one of your clone goes to Mars, one of your clone is on Mercury, one of yours is on Europa. Let's just say that there is no such a thing as radiation. We could deal with all of that stuff. The magnetic field, all of that sort of stuff. The time to get there, time means nothing. As long as it could stay alive when it's traveling from one to the other, then it makes sense. Let's say if you've got all of that worked out, how much can you learn from those multiple areas with a hands-on experience? Would you be motivated to learn? That's the question. Well, there's going to be a lot more not doing than there is doing. You see, this expands what you are. With multiple awarenesses of what you are, in multiple different areas, there's a lot of information coming in, granted, but there's also a lot of times of intermittent boredom. So how would you work the ratio? Would you have one do something while one rests, then another one picks up to do something? This information is going to be coming back to the so-called mothership, which would be what you are. So would you design these clones to be in torpor, but be highly aware when something happens, and then actively disengage when nothing's happening? When the information comes, that's when this version here on mothership livens up. what type of a life would that be? How much discovery could you make? One star system, a clone gets dropped off to be able to clone, to clone, to clone, to clone. Why? Because the information. Then how many of your brethren, your brothers and sisters on the planet? Because you see, that's when it turns you into a family in the grand scheme of things. So you think about humanity right now, it's quite divided, no one's looked at as family. What happens when you stop the reproducing? Sure, I'm sure people will still have sex, right? Do you get what I mean? Like, there's multiple of you to do so. Gee me. Finding a girlfriend was never so easy. And when you've got multiple of you, but you stop having children, don't you look to one another as a bit more of an extended family? In the grand scheme of things, you do. It changes you. It really does. It enhances your mindset that person over there, sure, you're not in a relationship with them, brings a whole new meaning to it, but that looks like more like an extended family member. Why? Because extended family member means that you've seen this person over and over and over and over. 350 years turns into 600 years, turns into 1,000 years, turns into 2,000 years, millennia. These people have become quite a part of your furniture. When you're learning this information and your ability to think, and then your ability to listen to what other people have learned, what you've learned, what you're learning, actively learning, what other people are learning. And when you learn from other people, it's more like, ooh, I really want to try that. Yeah, fuck it, I'll clone, I'll sacrifice one for over there. More resources coming in. And then, does that become a life for humans? And again, it's not a life in the sense, traditional sense, and it would warp your understanding. And knowledge, whew, there ain't no competition on knowledge because everybody is capable of learning the same stuff. It all depends on where their fancy is. And then, is there wasting time? Well, not really. And then, the expression, you're really wasting life. You're wasting your life, you are. Sure. Depends on how you look at wasting life. If you're making a clone, and then you recycle this stuff, you can recycle what's broken down, because you get better at it. What do you do with the old you that's now a shell? And that's another thing which is a real surreal experience, to be able to watch your version of you. And this seems very morbid, but I'm going to state it anyway because it's just something. When you die, it's not over, right? Just because your clone has stopped operating. This is when it creates more of a divine understanding. That the operating system that housed you, that has just dropped, and if your other clone is in vicinity of this, you get to watch it break down, which you would never have been able to do. You would never be able to see yourself as a baba and grow. Now you can. And you would also be able to experience death, but not only that, death doesn't finish when we look at body sense. There's the breakdown factor. To watch your old shell break down. That's interesting. I mean, what type of data do you get from that? Something that you never live to see. Wait, that sounds so really weird, doesn't it? To say that you could live to see your own body break down. A surreal experience. I buried one of my clones here once. 1,000 years ago. Brings a whole new meaning to sacred, doesn't it? I mean, what could you do with that type of level of capability? And to be honest, you're on the way to doing it. It's not right now, but very much in the future, this becomes it. And then you got to ask yourself the question: how many other life forms have actually done this? That's the. And then, if you get really good at this to be able to clone yourself, another question would run through your mind is, what's it like to live as an animal? A database that you've only ever watched from outside of yourself. So you've watched birds fly. But what about to have that awareness to clone yourself into a type of bird? And experience that as that torpor. Then it enhances your understanding of what... Because you usually look at a bird and think, I wonder what they're thinking. Do they think? Are they thinking? Well, how do you really know? Well, if you became it, if your awareness was put into the bird and you would retain this information and bring it back, I mean, it's a little bit more far-fetched and it's really getting off the topic for this one. So again, that's going to be another video. Then to understand multiple realities, a reality from what type of animal? Well, that's my favorite animal. Oh, I might want to give it a go. To live and experience life from the eyes of your animals. I mean, whew, interesting. That's a very interesting thing, right? And then how much knowledge do you actually get from that experience? That's the thing. Because you can only imagine right now, but it's a hell of a difference to know it. And how do you know it? Hands-on experience. Well, technically, it's not really hands-on, mind-on experience. So you can only think you know. And then how are they communicating? Well, that poses another thing. You are being taught by the very thing that you become how to communicate. And then how are they telling each other? How do they know how to follow a line? How do they Right now, you have no idea. Science is best guess. Well, we think it's like this and we think it's like that, but then you become it. Well, now I fucking know. Now I know. Wow, that's interesting. What do you know? I won't ruin it for you. Don't want to be a spoiler. You want to experience it? Yeah, I do. Don't tell me. Don't ruin it for me. Alright. See you when you're back. So to live as an animal and then to learn their language because they teach you it. Again, surreal experience, but to take that information and then from a third person perspective now with that information from their perspective, how can you make their lives better? You have to know. Well, you gotta be able to know. And then another question that you would probably be thinking is, can you teach them to communicate back with you as yourself now? Yeah, that's interesting. To be aware and try and send some information of what you are, challenging, absolutely challenging, to try and pack that information of what you are, which then leads you back to the divine, to understand what you actually are and whether it brings a whole new meaning into it, right? So you might not know a true death because you've been cloning and not really cheating death, and that's not cheating death. If it's not possible, this is the question, or this is the sort of thought. If it's not possible, then the universe didn't want you to do it. But if it is possible and you achieve it, then yeah, you had the divine's blessing to do so. Interestingly enough, moral and all the rest of it, but still, in good things like that, with that type of thought, is very healthy. It gives you permission. You can't know that for sure, but again, you miss that death experience. But what it does do, if you are able to live as an animal and experience it from an animal's perspective, and then you ask the question of, well, I now know how they communicate, I've retained that information, I can translate that based on this filter, that filter. Now, when you try and put what your information is into something that is smaller, something that is different, something that hasn't evolved, it leaches bits out. It becomes quite a mystery. How do you do it? Not saying that it's impossible. Don't want to ruin it for you. Don't let me ruin the surprise. But it then makes you question, are you, as a human, everything that you think you are? Because if it's a struggle to put that information into something else that is what you are, in order to make a translation from animal to human and understand that data and be able to teach them as well as understand what they are doing and what they are saying, experiencing, and then be able to try and draw the gap between communicating with one another by linking the gap together. But yet for whatever reason, just that part just is challenging to get that information to go in, let's say an ant. Then it makes you really, that's a reflection that you have as a vessel to this. Because if there is a limit to what information you can put into the ant, then are you limited as the being from your true capability? Interesting, very interesting. Now, let's say you do die as all your clones die, and technologies come to a part where you can capture the soul and then start the process again. Pain in the ass. Terrible as fuck. But let's say you can do that. There's this sort of... You'll become aware of something that you'll dip upwards, and then you'll capture it. That pyramid gets you questioning, what is that? That is almost like something is trying to get the essence of you and take it. You sort of, it's something that starts to elevate. Pyramid starts to rise up, but you capture it. That's what brings it. It's almost like an invisible force, if you like, a bit like magnets that have this sort of effect, and it creates a pattern, much like this. What do you reckon that is? Now, that really enhances your understanding a lot. Why? Because you're learning about something else. There's a invisible something going on. What that is? Well, it's give you another piece to the puzzle. Shan't tell you it all. Then plus with the animal limitation, and then you look at yourself with the limitation, but you're stretching the capability via cloning. The longer you live, the more you understand, the more you know as an individual as opposed to a bloodline. You're learning about many different deaths. Not only are you learning information, you yourself, information from the outer world, you're also learning information from death, birth. Each time you see it in the clone rising, you're learning a little bit more. And a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more, and it doesn't seem to stop. And even in death, it seems to be just as equal to birth to death. Evolution is dealing with this data, all of this info that's coming in, which helps to evolve you more so as you are in real time. And this speeds up. This slow process begins to speed up. The info that you learn begins to condense, compact down. And then more comes in and it's got to compress. More comes in and it's going to compress, and it's going to compress, and it's going to compress. This creates evolving. More data, more this, more that, more that. And to think about it, over a course of, you don't notice it as you're going through it. The changes to you, you don't notice over the years. Let's say you're clone. But yet, if you were to take pictures and then flick them in a flick book, but you got to sit in the same position every single time to have the picture taken. At the same ratio of age, or clone gets to a certain stage, and then you sit down and to get your picture taken. The changes, once run through a flick book, are fucking crazy. You get to see it in real time. That is very weird. You don't notice it because you're in that moment. It's always the now. It's always now. It's always now. Regardless of what clones died, it's always now. It's almost collapsing in on itself. I mean, would that be a life? It sounds like a dream, doesn't it? And that's possible in your own biome. What do you reckon's happening outside of it? Whatever that is. What do you think is going on there? So if you're able to enhance all of this here, then with all of the information from death that goes to here, although it's slow, how much does that enhance this? And even if you do manage to clone, and then something happens, and then it's at the end of the cycle and everything dies, even all your clones do, something has grabbed that information. Something else has taken that information. So it doesn't matter And you can only assume that if you can condense this information like this here, then it still benefits this at your true death as opposed to a clone death. And then it poses another question in that clone death. Are you getting part of the information and that gets part of the information? And then this leads you on to try and work things out. Would you work it out? Would you be fascinated about this? This would have you awestruck. Shan't ruin it. It's up to you to believe whatever you want to believe. But cloning, taking off, the quantum mind develops, the physical one develops. Some things drop off, some things increase. What do you reckon about all that? If you could have that as your existence, well, war comes obsolete. There's no point. Not really. And then to remain hidden, hidden and protected. Multiple scatterings. Ooh. Got to check on the safe every now and then to keep it safe. You can use robotics to help with this, no problem. Because you have to make onion layers around it. By then you've probably keeping a clone going, and all that information, all of it, condensed. So yeah, I would say that the universe wouldn't care if you did this or not, because at the end of the day, everything's a net. Everything gets scooped. All of that knowledge that you enhance still gets taken, still gets learned. And what does it expand here? Is that the democracy? But the iron fist. What is that? Interesting. Anyway, I'm going to leave this one here because I think I've gone on about it a little bit too much, but I will break this down, and I will also break this one down, and I got one more to break down. I'll do it on another video. This is good enough for me. I enjoyed this. I got much more to unpack. I got a lot more to unpack. An incredible amount coming, so you ain't going to want to miss it. Or maybe you do. Maybe you do. Maybe you want to find out for yourselves. But reality is far more stranger than anything you can imagine. And then there again, isn't the quantum world more? Reality is more stranger. And we are on a object that is flying around a nuclear furnace in a cold area versus heat, in light and darkness. But because you're born in all that crazy, it doesn't appear to be, does it? It's a good crazy though.